Okay, we're back in now, and I want to thank you for returning to the channel. Today I'm going to be talking about theology, and I'm going to be using the background from my first two videos regarding the Philistines. Uh, First thing about theology, I'm using that instead of religion, although my book that I wrote is about religion, and it's called Satan's Influence in the Church. But here I'm going to talk about theology because I'm going to talk about every human being's type of thinking, not only the religious thinking, but whether they have any religion or they don't believe in a supreme being. I'm going to talk about all of them. Now, the first thing we'll do is get started with the Christian beliefs that I am very aware with. I was converted in a Southern Baptist church in Richmond, California, when I was 9 years old. And one of the first things that the Lord taught me was, I don't want you to be a preacher or teacher. Now, needless to say, the reason I bring that up is for the next 12 years, I did not agree with what I was being told. I thought that anyone, once you were saved, you were basically going to be a preacher or teacher. That's what everyone was. That was the teaching of the church. After about 12 years, I finally got on board and realized that was wrong. So we have opinions that we use, and this is what I'm going to be talking about, is each and every individual's opinion. The opinions that we have in Christianity, I'm going to talk about the other religions. I'm going to use them as a general category because I have not studied Buddhism or Mohammedanism, any of that stuff. So I don't know necessarily what those people believe, but I do think the categories that I'm going to use in explaining how it works in our thinking will answer all of the questions for everyone by the time we're done. My attitude about religion is that when, as I expressed before, God created man, he created a horsepower engine. When God created a woman, he created a love engine. Now, why we have horsepower and love engines, people usually refer to God as being the all-knowing, all-understanding God, and God is also love and truth. So God exemplifies the personality of males and females. That's why in my video about the Philistines, I realized how important it was for men and women to be treated equally in a government or in a community. Now, what I want to talk about here is the thinking each one of us has and the limits to that thinking. What I feel is that the what we would refer to as the high IQ group have made some errors in overlooking some situations that could improve the society that we all live in. Now, I am not trying to be a preacher or teacher here, so I am not advocating that anyone believe anything I'm saying, because I'm drawing conclusions from very limited information, and there is more than a 50-50 chance that I may be wrong. Well, the reason I'm bringing up these issues is these are issues I think the high IQ group should look at again, explore for themselves what I am communicating, and see if I have made an assumption that is correct, and that our communities should be modified so that the assumptions that will change our thinking will also change our actions, and then as the change of actions, the result we get will be different than the one we're getting now. Now, that being said, what I am talking about is, as I've referred to before, opinions are like snowflakes. Everyone has one. Now, the thing is that they're all different. But what I'm going to be doing is talking about the extremes of thinking of one area over another. And the first area is a supreme being. Now, by a supreme being, I'm talking about Christianity and every other religion on the face of the planet, or any kind of religious attitude that the person has adopted for himself so that he can basically regulate his horsepower engine. And it is a necessity for men to regulate their horsepower engines, or what they actually get is further and further down the line until they get to the ultimate extreme of the attitude of a horsepower engine, which I've expressed before is, if it doesn't agree with you, kill it. That attitude is exactly what would eliminate human beings from the face of the planet. But with women being in the society and having that modified, or using religion to modify your opinion, and these opinions are how we think about ourselves in dealing with other people. The area of what happens when we deal with other people, in my opinion, is the responsibility of the government. And we will talk about that when I get into the political videos on what the government rules should be and should not be. Right now, we're only going to stick about the opinions that people should have. Thought society. Now, by a thought society, I mean what goes on in the mind. By something going on in the mind, I'm going to cover as much of that as I can, because it is my opinion that what goes on in the mind is what reflects on what our actions are going to be. And I think that people have learned some time back to use religion in order to modify their horsepower engine. And that is to adopt attitudes that would be contrary to what a horsepower engine would choose. And the reason you have religion is that in most religions, there is some kind of a benefit to the individual for modifying his actions or his opinions, which will also modify his actions. Now, the opinions that we have are, in my opinion, in two categories. We, as human beings, have a choice. And by a choice, that means at any given moment, we can choose to do one thing over another. Now, once we have made that choice and the incident has happened, that now becomes history. It no longer has to be thought of as a decision-making project. It is a situation where we can examine and see what the result of that choice was, what the consequences of that choice was, and try to teach the human beings that come after us how to modify their choices so they can have a more successful community. Now, on the brain, we have things that we think are right and things that we think are wrong. Now, generally, a horsepower engine will many times think it's right for me to do that to someone else. It's not right for someone else to do it to me. And that is why those issues need to be handled by the government. That is not a religious attitude. By religious attitudes, I'm talking about what we start with, how we deal with it through life, and what we end up with. Now, I'm going to talk about the Christian religion, and I'm going to then say that it applies to all of them. The Christian religion says, when you accept God, Jesus Christ is your Savior, you are a new creature. You have a new attitude, and you think differently than the old person used to think. And then they go on the different rules that Jesus set out for human beings to follow. And if you follow those human beings, you are in the will of God. And if you do not follow those human beings, you are outside the will of God. Now, that is a fairly straightforward expression about how it looks. The problem is that some people find religion an attitude of pre-human beings, Neanderthals, because all you have to do is have a thought that God wants you to do it, and you can do anything that you want to do. Now, it is true that many Christians have had that attitude, and they have gone to the extreme of killing other human beings because they said God told them to do it. If you read through the Old Testament of the Bible, you will find many, many incidents where that happened. Now, I think that each and every other religion has the same type of categories. Someone has given rules and regulations and laid them down and allows people to move forward with the thinking that they want to have. Now, that being said, I'm going to go back to the thinking part of the discussion. By the thinking part of the discussion, I think it is every human being's responsibility to live the best life that he knows how to live. And in the religion that I'm in, it says you do not do anything to anyone you would not want them to do to you. Now, that's a general category. If everyone followed that, we would already achieved what I'm trying to achieve. But that isn't what happens. Many men, after they get married, will do things that the wife finds unsatisfactory in the marriage, and it causes problems. And they end up having to resolve the problems in ways that is usually detrimental to both of them. What I want to do is to have a thinking and agreement with the people you're dealing with prior to you making the actions. I think that if we are clear with the people that we associate with, if we have a girlfriend or a close companion, we should be very clear with them about what we're thinking about doing and getting their opinion on what they think is right and wrong. And I think that if we do not engage in any activity that is contrary to what both think, then you can probably move forward. Now, I say probably move forward because when I get to my political speeches, there's going to be limits on everyone on the issue of how you treat other people. This religion I'm talking about is how we think for ourselves and the limits that we put on ourselves. One of the major things that I want to talk about is there was a term existentialism. And they do, in fact, Marx said the opiate of the people is religion. And even though it has been taken out of context, Marx has the attitude that we cannot have in a society. And therefore, that's why people have to belong to a religion, so you can modify the natural attitude that human beings have. Now, the reason Marx had that attitude, he was a very intelligent man, not the group that I belong to, but I understand them. I've met and understood a lot of very intelligent human beings in my life. And what Marx runs into, and the problem he has, and that's why I favor religion, is that human beings having a choice means that we can be creative. We can create things. Now, in the Bible, this would count for the Jewish people as well, or the Israeli people, because our Old Testament of the Bible, I understand, is almost word for word what their religious attitude is. And it says, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Now, having the attitude of being able to create, which is the same thing that God did, the horsepower engine makes the mistake that they are similar to God's. And most people is going to say that's crazy thinking. That's not true. Pharaohs in Egypt and the Caesars during the Roman Empire thought of themselves as a god. Now, it is true that every one of them have a problem with mortality, because none of us are going to live forever. If you believe in religion, you believe that God always has existed and always will exist. But if you do not believe in God, you do not have an attitude where you can turn over to someone else what we used to refer to in construction is work that's above your pay grade. The truth of the matter is, human beings are going to have a lifespan and they're going to die. And that is going to be true. So we are not gods. We cannot create anything we want. We can create a lot of things. Now, in my opinion, the Homo sapiens, human beings, people that could make a choice. Now, I hear on the videos that people talk about Neanderthals and other kinds of people, and they try to trace how we changed by growing out of becoming a Neanderthal to a human being. That is not an accurate assumption, because if that were true, then a lot of Neanderthals would have created the same situation that created a lot of Homo sapiens. It would have just been a matter of transitioning from one thing to another. But any transition in nature takes thousands of years, if not hundreds of thousands of years. And we know that the people that we call, that they refer to as our predecessor, which made Freud draw the conclusion that we came from apes and became these primitive people, and then we became Homo sapiens. That is not true, and I will state why. Those people are animals. An animal cannot make a distinction. What makes a distinction is us is the only intelligent life form on the face of the earth. In other words, no other life form has the ability to make choices. They all do what God gave nature, or nature gave them the attitude of doing, and they follow that attitude through their entire life, and they die. Now, it is true that we can see a lot of similarities between us and them when we look at nature. And what I'm projecting now is that one of two things happened, and that was a fluke of nature. Whatever it happened to be, how it happened to be, and how it happened, I have no idea. But somehow a Homo sapien came out of one of those animals. It could have been male or female. Now, I do remember seeing a movie that actually shared the same kind of attitude. I think Daryl Hannah played that she was in a group of people that basically were primitive compared to her. And she was able to have a child and move on. Now, that is exactly what happened. This male, if it was a male, had relation with the female of the group, and they produced another Homo sapien, although it was 50% of the other nature of the animal as well. And that is, from that happening, then they continued. So that means every Homo sapien on the planet could be traced back to either one male or one female at some time in the past. Now, that is one explanation of what probably happened. The chance of having multiple flukes happen all at the same time after hundreds of thousands of years is beyond comprehension. That's not the kind of thing that happens. That's not the kind of thing that you can rely on, and it almost never happens. All you have to do is go to any gambling house and roll dice and say, I want to see snake eyes come up 10 times in a row. You can have that attitude. It's not probably ever going to happen. And it didn't happen this time either. The other logical consequence was that another intelligent life form found the earth and found that on this earth there were no intelligent life forms. So what they did is they did a little gene splicing, used one of the other animals that we had, Neanderthals or one of those, and gene spliced and created several babies that came out as Homo sapiens. And if that were true, what you're never going to find is it's never going to trace back to one person. If it goes back, as I've heard, the DNA testing to multiple layers that we can't track all the way back, that meant that we had multiple situations happen. The video is now over 20 minutes. I let the Philistine 2 go actually over 30 minutes, and so I want to keep that down. I want the videos to be 20 minutes long, but I would not like them to go to 25 minutes. So I'm going to terminate it here. I'm going to continue the discussion in Theology number 2, which I will come out with hopefully next week. Thanks for coming and watching. Thanks for being here. If you appreciated the video, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe, and I look forward to having you join me at a future date. Goodbye for now.